is the barrier to blood donation a financial one? Is the barrier to reading a financial one? Then why are we incentivizing them to do that?
If we do this too often and too frequently, people start getting used to getting paid to do something that they don't want to do.
But then again, a nudge can be, I can be a nudge or I can be a nudge, right?
Hello everyone, Tiffany here with Stephen on another episode of the Deep Dive podcast. Now, Stephen, give you two scenarios.
Okay.
One, would you prefer to walk 10,000 steps a day and get nothing at all? Or two, walk exactly the same 10,000 steps and this time I will give you a voucher for it.
Oh, a voucher for like food, drink, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, of course. Why not?
No-brainer, right?
Yeah.
And I think most Singaporeans would also say, give me the points, give me the voucher, because if I'm doing something good for myself anyway, why not, double dip this?
That's right. But the question is, should we be rewarding all kinds of behavior that some people feel should be intrinsically good, And is there a downside to such incentives being provided all the time?
Yeah, and like for example, we have the earn points for exercising. We talked about that. Blood donors can receive health points on their Healthy 365 app. Young people can receive credits to explore new skills. And the National Library Board will start rewarding people to read. So the obvious response is, hey, what's the problem? If you are being rewarded to do the right thing, surely that's not a bad situation to be in, right?
Okay, so to help us unpack this, we have with us today Dr Serene Koh, Director of the Behavioural Insights Team, and her team works with various ministries and NGOs to see if they can nudge Singaporeans to make better choices.
Hello, everyone.
Also, Assistant Professor Lawrence Jin from the Kuan School of Public Policy. He's done a study on exercise in Singapore, gave participants $2 a day if they could maintain their fitness program.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Welcome both. So I'm one of those who use the Healthy 365 app to collect points, right? Because I figured if I'm already exercising, why not get rewarded for this? And it actually has motivated me to get more steps each day. But what are we also teaching the next generation, right? Is it that everything needs to be incentivized?
Actually, government policies and interventions are, by nature, a lot of them are transactional. So there already exists taxes on alcohol, taxes on cigarettes to discourage those kinds of behaviors. There are subsidies for education or taking vaccines to try to encourage those behaviors. So in some sense, I think, providing incentives to do things like, to read more or to exercise more are not dramatically more transactional than what's already been happening.
Yeah.
But that said, I think you do raise an important concern, which is at some point, if we sort of throw all these programs and
just money at like programs, right? Yeah,
exactly. Then at some point, will people sort of change their long run expectations about what should be driving their actions?
But I think it's the signal that monetary incentive is a lever that I will almost always use, and I'm starting to feel like it's almost always used reflexively, which means like it's the first thing I try, not like my last resort. It's my first instinct, which I think it's probably slightly problematic depending on what the behavior is.
Okay.
I think that monetary incentives can be one of many levers that you exercise. It shouldn't be the first, right? It should be, have you actually thought about why people aren't reading? Why aren't people volunteering? Why aren't people actually donating blood? And then use the lever that is most appropriate for the barrier rather than, I'm assuming that it's because people need to be paid, so I'm just going to pay them. So I don't think rewards are intrinsically wrong. Like Ron says that there are lots of transactions that we perform, but I think it's whether or not it's the best one, given what we know the problem is or not.
Since both of you study, how to nudge behaviors, I'm actually curious, what does the research say about how effective rewards are to actually nudge behavior for the long term?
Actually, let's
Yeah.
ask
Yeah,
you
let's
about
talk
your
about
study,
that.
right?
Sounds
About
good.
the
Thank you.
exercise.
Thank you for the
So,
great
so,
segue.
so you've done a study on this
Yes.
exercising, and we gave you a bit of an intro earlier on. So tell us, what were the results?
Sure.
And were you surprised by those results?
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess before I talk about the study, just a little technical note. So the word nudge we use that often, but within behavioral science, it has a specific meaning, which is we're modifying the decision-making environment in a way that doesn't dramatically change the incentives or restrict freedom. So in that sense, I would say financial incentives are not a nudge. It's actually more than a nudge. So nudges would be things like, for example, providing, social norms information about what your neighbors are doing when it comes to electricity use and things like that. More gentle interventions.
Okay, not a big step. But then again, a nudge can be, I can be a nudge or I can be a nudge,
shove,
right?
a shove.
Well,
We call that a
it's
shove.
relative what you call a shove. I call a
The shove is a
stronger
penalty.
nudge. That's all,
Yes. Fair enough. Going back to your question, which is an important one. Several years ago, we conducted a study. We recruited about 500 Singapore adults, healthy adults, to participate. And this was actually a year-long study in which we provided small daily financial incentives for them to meet their daily step goals for about 9 months. And then after that, we stopped giving them incentives.
Okay.
And we continue to monitor their behavior in the post-intervention period, the 3 months after that.
Okay, I gotta ask you, how much a day?
It's if you meet your goal, about $2 a day.
Okay.
That's it.
And we give them a free
Quite good.
Fitbit. So
Okay.
it's
Oh,
another
okay.
freebie.
That's probably worth more than the $2 a day. I think.
Although I have seen within our data, there were several subjects who were able to meet the goals every single day for 9 months. So they've accumulated
wow.
quite a bit of money.
Okay.
So I'm curious, what happened after you stopped the financial reward?
Exactly. And that's sort of the key question at hand, right? And to our surprise, after 9 months of small daily incentives, the moment we removed the incentives, we saw perfect persistence. So zero drop off
From everyone.
this is an average effect.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Actually, if we dig into the data a little bit, we actually find that for some subjects, for the majority, it was perfectly sticky. So it's as if at that point they didn't care about rewards at all. Now, there were also some subjects where there were a bit of a drop off. I think it was about 15 to 20% of the subjects where there was a bit of a drop off. But interestingly, there were also about 10 or 15% of the subjects where it actually went up.
Oh.
Yeah. So you had cultivated behavior. It had become routine, part of my life.
That's what we think
Right.
has happened. Yes, exactly right. Because
But do you think it was the length of study though? Because you said 9 months, right? 9 months is
true.
actually a very long time to, get a habit formation.
That's right. And I think there are many things that sort of have to be satisfied for this to happen, I believe. So first, it has to be sufficiently long. So like you said, habit formation requires time and repetition. Another is high frequency. So you could have a study that's 9 months long, but the how frequently you incentivize them could be, once a month or once every 2 weeks. That's not going to cut it. So that's why in our study we provided daily incentives. And then finally, and this is sort of a more subtle point, the design of the incentive system has to balance the following two things. On the one hand, I think the rewards have to be attractive, salient, visible, enticing enough to attract newcomers. At some point, the intrinsic value of that activity has to take the front seat, and the reward has to go to the back seat.
Okay.
And so it's very important to design an incentive system that sort of strikes that balance between the two. So maybe 1 or 2 months into the intervention, you want the rewards to not be so visible, not be so salient anymore.
But also how much of it is, in your study, is also people who want to participate in the study. So a lot of, you mentioned right at the top that these are healthy individuals. So they already adopted some form of active lifestyle, I would suppose.
That's right.
What if you are, selecting half of the participants are people who have never left the couch? So how much of it is also the participants, desire?
And that's actually very, very important. So in our study, for example, we recruited participants. In other words, we sent out ads and people reached out to us telling us that they wanted to participate. So in some sense, we were getting a select pool of subjects who were motivated and interested in this kind of topic and this kind of project. If you roll out a program population-wide, for example, and it may not be as effective simply because you're going to get a lot of people who are participating, not totally motivated and interested in the topic, but they just want to say game the system a little bit and earn some points and rewards along the way.
So what behaviors respond well to rewards, and conversely, what behaviors don't respond well to rewards?
So I think, like Lawrence was saying, I think anything to do with physical well-being probably lend themselves a little bit better. So smoking cessation being a key one. I think the thing about smoking is that, studies have shown either paying people to quit smoking, or we give people a bonus and then they lose bits of that bonus if they don't keep to their regime.
The carrot and the stick.
The carrot and the stick. So for those ones, I think once you've quit smoking for like a couple of weeks, for instance, your body starts to enjoy the benefits of it, right? You breathe better, you're able to exercise more without wheezing, your complexion probably looks better as well. And so these intrinsic benefits take over. It's like what the exercise example, right? And then you start realizing that actually I didn't really need the money. There are other things I enjoy about quitting smoking than just being paid for it.
Right.
I think the things which are less, less appropriate or less sticky are things which you want people to have developed naturally or intrinsically, right? Things like blood donation or reading, which are meant to come from, within. These are things that are meant to perpetuate. I mean, we use words like a culture, right? And we use words like nurture, we use words like develop. We don't say install, right? Install a practice sounds like it's something that should be immediate, in which case then yes, an incentive probably will get you that immediate effect. But we're talking about something that you need to nurture over time, develop over time. A culture is not something that is born overnight. And so I think when we use those words, behaviors that we use those words to describe, those are the ones that I think instinctively you already know, we probably shouldn't pay people for those.
Yeah. Does intention actually matter if the social outcome is the same? So I give you an example, right? If Stephen donates blood because he thinks that it's good for society and he wants to contribute, whereas I donate because I want to collect the health points, does it really matter? Because at the end of the day, a bag of blood is a bag of blood, right?
I think that's a classic example where we have provided incentives for people to donate blood, and it actually backfired. Studies have shown that actually by providing incentives, it actually takes away the intrinsic value of this charitable act of donating blood for the good cause. And we call this the crowding out effect of intrinsic motivation.
So explain crowding out effect.
So the crowding out effect is a phenomenon where we already have an intrinsic motivation to engage in an activity, like, for example, donating blood. The moment you provide a reward in exchange for donating blood, it no longer becomes an act of good, right? So then people who were previously donating blood because they wanted to do something for the good of the society no longer do it because now it's a transaction.
So I'm doing this big good deed, and now you've monetized it. My good deed may be misconstrued. People may think, hey, he's doing it for the money, so I stopped doing that.
Exactly right.
So I always joke, because I do a lot of volunteer work, I tell people, come for the wrong reasons, but stay for the right ones. So in a way, you started for the money, but you stayed because you found, hey, this is meaningful work. So
I think that there's an assumption in there. The assumption is that if you start for the wrong reasons and then something happens to you intrinsically once you have performed this behavior to then get you to keep doing it once the reward has gone away. So volunteer is one. Because there's this warm glow you feel after you've helped someone. And so you realize that, actually, despite the points, I quite like being here. I quite like talking to the old people. I quite like, helping these kids, for instance. I think we sometimes assume that every behavior is like that. Like volunteering, blood donation, reading, that as long as we can just get them to do it, even if it's for the wrong reasons, then the habit takes over. But I don't actually think that it's necessary always like that for all behaviors. So I think it's about being quite precise about which types of behaviors you are targeting, with what kind of levers.
Yeah. But some incentives, I also note that it's really not about motivation at all. It's really about also access, right? So so let's say, for example, if a teenager can't afford an enrichment activity, then the $500 in curiosity credits, which was mentioned a few weeks ago, doesn't nudge them towards good behavior, right? It actually removes a financial barrier for them.
Yep.
So when we are talking about as a whole, like we have the curiosity credits and then we have the reading stuff and then we have the health points and everything, are we wrongly lumping very different policy intentions together and calling all of them incentives?
You've perfectly struck the nail on the head, right? Like, I think, you talked about how if a young person doesn't have access to an enrichment program, then we make it easier for them. We remove that barrier by giving them, a subsidy or a grant, right? But that's precisely the right thing to do, which is that you've identified that the barrier is a financial one, and so then the solution is a financial one. But I don't think that we do the same diagnosis for all of the behaviors that we've been talking about. Is the barrier to blood donation a financial one? Is the barrier to reading a financial one? If the answer is no, then it begs the question of then why are we incentivizing them to do that?
So with curiosity credits, like Serene said, it removes a financial barrier, but also the goal is a little bit different in nature in the sense that the direct primary goal is the exploration itself, right? So in that sense, the program, in my view, has a lower bar for success because using incentives, and if they're able to sort of explore, gain new experiences, that in itself is, you could consider that a success. Whereas other programs that, try to sort of, encourage reading or, do exercise or change people's, diet, these have a higher bar for success in the sense that we're not interested in just getting people to read a couple more books today or go to the gym a couple of times this week. We're really incentivizing them in the hopes that they will eventually form long-term habits. So in that sense, curiosity credits is quite different qualitatively.
The key for success of the curiosity credits in particular is the exploration. It's not about whether or not this becomes a lifelong vocation, right? Like I don't think that's the point. The point is that we are trying to jumpstart this process of exploring, of asking. It's called curiosity for a reason.
If we attach a financial reward to an activity, does it also make it seem that this activity is too difficult? So, and that we should be rewarded for doing it. For example, you pay me to read a book, you pay me to exercise, you pay me to donate blood. Will I subconsciously conclude that all these are very difficult things to do?
The fact that you are incentivizing me already signals that it is difficult. I think I worry less about the fact that it's seen as difficult than if it's seen as unpleasant, right? Like something that's difficult is hard, but maybe if I try hard enough, I might be able to do it. But when you pay someone, and this is something that someone had mentioned to me, so I didn't think about this myself. They're like, oh, but does this now make it seem as if reading is an unpleasant activity? That's why you have to incentivize me. I hadn't thought about it, but now that I think about it, maybe. And I think that it depends on who it is as well. If you're somebody who's already loves reading, right, I don't think that it would change your impression. Like you wouldn't suddenly start thinking that this thing that I've loved all my life is bad.
Like, hey, let's collect some points.
Yeah, exactly. It's like if you're already exercising and I pay you, great, I'm already doing something good. But I think it's for the people who are your actual target audience, who are the people who are not reading, don't like reading, maybe never thought of picking up a book, and they're like, Sila, that's why you have to pay people because it's not nice to do.
I ask that because we are thinking like adults, right? But what is the signal we are sending to children? Like if I'm rewarding my child to read, am I also signaling to a very undeveloped brain that, it's a very unpleasant thing to do and I'm really sorry, which is why I decided to reward you for it. Does it affect children differently?
I personally am not too worried about it. So let me also tell you a little bit of an anecdote. So my dad is an economist. And when I was really young, he also incentivized me to wash the dishes or do the laundry. Every time I did it, he gave me 2 or 3 Singapore dollars worth. I was in Hong Kong at the time. And honestly, just from introspection, looking back, I don't think I thought that far and that deep about what the implications were or what the signaling was. I just, as a kid, I wanted the money. I wanted to go buy some toys. And so he offered. And so I said, okay, I'll do the laundry. I'll get the $2 and I'll go buy my toy car or something like that. I guess I'm not personally too worried about the direct signaling effect too much. I'm sure it's there, but I don't know what the consequences would be and whether there would be consequential. But one thing I am worried about is whether if we do this too often and too frequently, people start getting used to getting paid to do something that they don't want to do. And once they start forming those once their expectations change like that, that's something that we might have to be concerned about and think about and monitor. From my reading of the literature right now, I don't think we're there yet, nowhere near that yet, but that is something that we should probably continue to monitor.
But again, it goes back to what Stephen said. What's wrong with that? If we have the money to pay, what's wrong with it?
And a lot of us get paid to do things we don't like, called work,
Yeah. So going back to that, what would be wrong with it?
Yeah. So that's one of the things that you just mentioned, right? It feels like work. Right? It feels like something that I have to be paid to do. And I think from a policy-making perspective, we also don't want to keep thinking that, if we have the money, why not? Because I think as a government, to be stewards of taxpayer money, we also don't want to always be paying to get something done. And some of the things that we are currently incentivizing shouldn't be paid, right? Again, I go back to this reading thing, something I feel very strongly about. The narrative that we've been told is that, no, you want to build this love for reading. You want to inculcate and nurture deep reading, critical reading. It's not doing chores, right? Chores it's just something that you have to do to like get through life. But a love for something. I'm not trying to inculcate a love for
I
chores.
would argue otherwise. I don't have to love reading. I need to read because it's a life skill. You know what I mean? So I don't have to love it.
So then goes into this, how do we measure whether or not the program has succeeded? So, right? So we talk about, you don't have to love reading, but I need you to read because it's a life skill, because you teach critical thinking skills, right? So then the assumption is that if we jump-started this through the payment, the children will start reading and then read critically. But what if, as a very calculative young child, I said, I'll just read comic books. Because comic books are the things that I like to read.
Right.
Now, there's a universe where reading comic books is perfectly fine. But if I only ever read comic books, or if I only ever read pamphlets, and I never go beyond that to this deep critical thinking books that are supposed to be good for me, then what you've just rewarded is reading books. You're not reading critically. You're not reading it in a way that actually develops the mental faculties that good reading builds.
And another aspect we might want to think about is so if we get people to spend, let's say, 1 hour more time in the library reading books, what is that time substituting away from? So is that person spending 1 hour less time on TikTok and on the phone, or is that person spending the same amount of time on TikTok but substituting away sleep? So the person is sleeping 1 hour less.
Right.
So we sort of have to like view it from a holistic point of view and see, these kind of how the variables move all together.
So I guess what you guys touched upon is the idea that the incentives is an entry point to somewhat good behavior, right? To that good behavior. But we also have to talk about that exit, right? Basically, how do you know that your scheme is well designed, your incentive is well designed? Because what's the end game? You want to try to remove that reward, but have that person still continue on with that behavior. How do we all know that when it's time to remove an incentive, or in this case, we can never turn off the tap?
Yeah, that's a very difficult question, and actually, it's one of the hotly studied topics right now. We're trying to better understand how we can understand when a person has already formed habits, so that we can pull back the rewards. It's very difficult, but I can tell you more of a theoretical answer. I think the theoretical answer is the point where the person is not even thinking about rewards. So when there comes a point during the intervention, points are accumulating, dollars are accumulating, but the person is not even thinking about that when deciding whether to engage in this activity or not. I think from a theoretical standpoint, that is the point where we feel comfortable about, dropping the incentives. But the more practical question is, how can we know, right?
Yeah. Have we seen any examples locally or globally where people have removed the incentive and yet the behavior has continued?
There are, so the evidence, as you can imagine, are highly context dependent. So you see huge variation, heterogeneity in the results of these kinds of field studies. I was a little bit lucky in that in our study, we saw perfect stickiness. I have seen a few other studies that show strong persistence. But also I've seen quite a number of studies where the behavior reverts completely back to how it used to be before. And there's a lot of studies in between that fall in between that spectrum. So again, I think this is really the sort of the important question we need to answer as an academic, is to figure out, so instead of just blanketly, providing an intervention and then arbitrarily setting a time and then pulling back, we need to sort of better understand at the individual level when an individual is ready for the incentives to be removed.
Wow. Okay. Otherwise, the danger is we become too dependent on such incentives, And I can explain why, but wait, what's in it for me?
Nothing.
On that note, folks, this has been Deep Dive. We've been talking, of course, about incentives that we use. Even many parents do for their children as well. Does it really work? Long-term consequences, all that's up in the air. But we hope you've enjoyed the discussion. And any questions, thoughts, do share it with us. Otherwise, that's it for this week's Deep Dive. Bye for now.
Bye.